Welcome to the Mental Mastery Golf Podcast by Dare2Dream, the show dedicated to fun, practical mental performance strategies for your golf game. Join mental performance coach Jamie Glazier and co-host Ross Flannigan as they discuss how to manage your mind in one of the craziest sports there is.
Welcome to episode 1 of the Mental Mastery Golf Podcast hosted by Dare2Dream. My name's Ross Flannigan and I'm your co-host of the Mental Mastery Golf Podcast, and sitting alongside me is the CEO and founder of Dare2Dream, Jamie Glazier. It's a great honour to be able to sit alongside Jamie and help him bring this podcast to life. It's a podcast about golf, but as the name suggests, it's a podcast about the mental mastery part of the golf game, which is the one that is the deep, dark area where we're going to delve into over the next series of podcasts and help you become better at golf by understanding exactly what mental mastery is. So we're going to take you on that journey. Beside me, Jamie Glazier. Jamie Glazier, welcome to what is your podcast.
Thanks, Ross. I obviously pretty excited to get this ball rolling. It's been a little while in the making. I know that you and I have been sort of playing a bit of golf the last 12 months and discussing, starting a mental game podcast. And I have to thank you for giving me the kick up the bum a few weeks ago to get this started. And as I said, I'm really excited to get this ball rolling and help give some guidance to the club level golfers, the amateur golfers, all golfers out there, a bit of guidance with the mental game.
Well, mate, if it was a kick up the bum that was needed to get it going, it was well worth it, because I think you and I have spoken long enough about golf along that journey of playing together, and we've seen each other play, and I think we know each other's games fairly well by now, and certainly you know mine. And I'm a big advocate for how your world can help my game improve. Now, I've not really ever, delved into practicing the mental side of the game, but it's an area that I've got great interest. So when you said, can you help me with the podcast, it was an absolute no-brainer. And I know that from my contacts and from the people on the Mile of Golf podcast, when we announced that we were doing this, it was so well received that I think there's a lot of people that need that type of help and are really going to be engaged in what you can bring them through this means of learning. So I guess to kick it off, let's tell the listeners a little bit about you and your background in this area. How did you become a mental coach, and when did all that journey start? Because a lot of people do know you, but this is going to reach around the world. A lot of people will want to know who Jamie Glazier is.
Yeah, look, I think interestingly for me, I was as a teenager an elite tennis player, sort of ranked inside the top 25 in the country, and the physical ability was there, but at times the mental ability wasn't there. Under pressure situations or big matches, I felt like my mind broke down. And when I sort of started to teach tennis when I was 19, I actually quit playing professionally. I sort of gave up that dream of playing professional tennis, and I took up the game of golf just to feed my competitive sort of instincts, and I got hooked very quickly. And I sort of got down to a pretty low handicap. Within about 18 months, I was down to I think a handicap of 1 or 2, and as soon as I started to get into competitive golf, the same thing happened. My mind just got in the way, and I couldn't perform the way that I knew I could in some of the bigger events. And one of the things that I suppose interests me was I went and sought the help of a sports psychologist, and it just didn't hit the spot. I just felt like there was more to it than what I was sort of getting access to. So I just started to research the human brain and the human mind and human behavioral patterns, and I found some things for me that were really impactful, and that's when I started the business. So I've been running the business for about 17 or 18 years, and have been on the journey of sort of mental performance for probably 22, 23 years.
So it's not you're not Dr. Jamie Glazier. But is it psychology based, or what? I guess empirical learning, or what learning skills have you developed over those 17 years, or what courses or that sort of thing? Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I'm not a clinical psychologist. No. So I'm an NLP master practitioner, which is neuro-linguistic programming, which has an element of neuroscience and an element of psychology. So and I think golf, the mental game, there is a decent amount of neuroscience involved in it, as well as psychology. So you blend those together, and I think that's where I come from, a bit of a different direction than, say, a lot of sports psychologists might. And I think that was the one thing that I mentioned to you the other day in wanting to deliver this podcast is I want to deliver content that maybe people haven't heard before. I want to bring something different, something fresh. Ever since day one of starting the business, my main goal was to break the human mind down and provide practical strategies, practical exercises for golfers, for athletes to improve their mental game, similar to a strength and conditioning coach would to the body.
So in your experience, what other types of sports have used this type of education and coaching to develop their performance?
Oh, look, I think absolutely every sport. One of my passionate areas, and again, the main driver behind me wanting to get this podcast and some of the video programs off the ground is sports psychology or mental performance training generally is accessed by elite athletes. So your amateur or club level golfer, they don't get as much access to this information. Now, the last sort of 3.5 years working out at Royal Melbourne Golf Club with the members and having access to members of all over the Sandbelt in general has really helped me to see how important mental performance training is for the average golfer, for the club golfer like you and I, and for the mid to high handicappers, because they're the ones that the mental game really, really affect, because let's say their physical ability isn't as good as an elite athlete. So an elite athlete or a professional golfer can get away with a little bit more of an unproductive mental game because their physical game is so good. But us as club golfers and the mid to high handicappers, they can't. So it's an area that I think really certainly gets in the way of their enjoyment and performance.
So you mentioned you're working down at Royal Melbourne Golf Club, and basically down there, you provide a service and a coaching service under the umbrella of the professional staff down there. Yep. Anyone can come and see you down there, is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So, but 17 years in the game, what other areas have you coached in, or what other experiences have you, had along that journey that's led us up until this point?
Yeah, look, I did a lot of different athletes, a lot of AFL footballers I've done a lot of work with, a lot of different sports, basketball, every sport, archery. Worked with a Commonwealth Games medalist years ago who was in archery, and I have done some corporate high performance stuff. And it was probably 3 years ago that I decided to just narrow my business down to golf specific. Yep. I'm a passionate golfer and have been for 20-odd years, and it's my hobby as well as it's my profession, and I really use, I suppose, my journey back into the game the last few years, because I had 10 or 11 years away from the game after back surgery. So coming back into the game the last 4 or 5 years, I really feel like I'm learning a lot more about how the mind does really impact a golfer.
Yeah.
I came back, played for about 18 months, and then all of a sudden got the yips. And when I was playing, my short game and putting was always my strength. And it was a really interesting sort of experience for me, because it was for the first time I actually really got to experience what it felt like to have the yips. Now, I felt like I knew what the brain was doing, and I worked with, helped cure the yips in so many people through the years. But for me to have it myself, it gave me a greater appreciation for what actually was going on, and more importantly, how empowering some of the strategies that I had for clients when I put them in place, how good they were to manage and ultimately eliminate the yips.
You'll certainly be able to help me with that as part of this, mate. And if nothing else, I come away with curing some of my putting and chipping yips. That'd be first class result for me. Now, mate, if you follow you on Instagram, you see how well travelled you are through the Dare2Dream work that you do.
Yeah.
Are you able to tell us about some of the elite players that you've worked with without breaking any professional confidences and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think it's Lucas Herbert I've worked with for the last sort of 4.5 years. Young Aussie guy that's had a really great 2018. Got himself into sort of 72 in the world, and he had a great run. Young Ryan Ruffles, and another Aussie that I work with, and a lot of Australian pros, elite amateurs here in Australia. I do work with an amateur. I probably can't mention her name for NCAA rules, but a young sibling of another client of mine who won a big tournament in the US that might be named the US Amateur a few months back. So look, I'm extremely blessed to have the opportunity to work with people of that ability, and it's fantastic.
Well, it's been for me, sitting back on the sidelines and watching you fly in and fly out of the country, and head off to a lot of European tour events, and see who you got up close and personal with, which I think I can say included walking the fairways in the same group with Tiger. It's mind-blowing the level of experience that must add to the knowledge bank, and just being able to see and be near that. I don't think that there's many people in the world in this sort of field that would access that type of experience. So, mate, it's great to have you sitting alongside us doing this. So you made the point that the intention of this podcast, I guess, is really to help people like me, help people like you listening at home, the club golfers of the world, become better golfers, become more complete, and become more prepared when you tackle the course. Sometimes that preparedness might not necessarily start, at the practice range or the first tee. We were talking earlier on, it might actually start the day before. So, in developing a series of podcasts and developing a series of programs, what's this journey going to look like? Every couple of weeks we'll put out a podcast and we'll have a different level of content. Yep. What are some of the things that, people who care to listen in might be, accessing from us? Yeah,
look, I think, stress and anxiety, or management of stress and anxiety is a big one for club level golfers. The fear of embarrassment, all the sorts of different things that the club golfer will experience. I put a post out the other night and have had, some great feedback in regards to some questions for tonight's episode, which we'll get to later. But again, those questions will drive the future content, because I want the people that are listening and engaging in this podcast to actually put forward what they would like to hear. But, a little bit of a breakdown of the human mind and the brain and what part that plays in the game. But more importantly, expectation management, preparing to perform your best under pressure situation. And that's different for everybody. I think the important thing with the mental game is there is no right or wrong. There's no one blanket approach to this element of the game similar to the technical side. It's everyone is different. Everyone is unique. We're going to throw some different ideas out there about what to try, how to approach different situations and scenarios. But ultimately it's dependent upon each individual. So, very much I want to provide practical strategies. So at the end of every podcast, I'll hope to give 2 or 3 exercises or drills or ways to be able to start to take control of your mental game, because anyone that's played golf long enough knows how damn crazy this game is that the only thing you really have control over is yourself, the way you act, react. You don't have control over your outcomes. The way the golf is, the bad breaks you get, you get punished maximum for a very minor mistake. And then the opposite can happen, where you don't get punished for a mistake, and funnily enough, you get rewarded. Like even this morning playing at Peninsula, playing with a gentleman, first time we played together, first hole in the south, he plays off scratch. He gets up there and just hits the driver off the bottom of the face, just straight right into the garbage. Hits a provisional, big high block cut right into the garbage. And we go down there and his first ball is on the 17th fairway, like just went through the bracken and it's just sitting there. You know, he can't even see the green, and he hits his shot up there to like 12 feet and holds a putt for birdie. And he walked off the tee thinking he's lost both balls and he's just had a wipe to start the day. Like that's how crazy the game is.
Yeah.
You know, like it's just mind-boggling how different this game is compared to other sports. So I want to get people to enjoy and embrace the craziness of golf.
Maybe there's just thinking as we're talking, and maybe there's an opportunity for us to, bring with this bit of technology that we've got here recording this, bring some people into the podcast and maybe take some live calls and run through some case studies, because I've got a case study from today, and, I've also played golf. We didn't play together, but I played in the afternoon. And, I was not cruising along. I was actually playing really well. I was 1 over par after 9 holes. Now, which for me, around the North Course of Peninsula is not a bad result. Playing with a golf professional, and a very good one at that, and we were sort of level pegging. And after the 18th hole was the 9th hole, so we played the back 9 first. After the 18th hole, walked up to the front first tee, and something happened. Something changed, and basically what changed led to the downfall of my round, basically.
Yeah.
And one situation that I sort of, and I'm asking you to, buddy, help me work through this, but one situation that I can sort of pinpoint that happened was my playing partner pulled out a driver on a hole which is not really a driver hole. It was downwind, so he could hit 5-iron. But he said, I'm going to hit driver. Probably shouldn't, but I'm going to. And in that moment, I felt something overcome me and say, if he can do it, I'm doing it.
Yeah. And
of course the result was I hit the worst drive of the day, blocked into the bracken fern, lost ball. Next one, another unlucky break, hit a decent shot, but it rolled off the fairway into, the gunge on the left, made a 6.
Yeah.
And it was the downfall of my round. And it almost felt like, my round had got to a point at 9 holes, but that's great. I'm going along really well. And something happened.
Yeah.
And I didn't recover from that.
Yeah.
And it affected a number of other things within the round
for the next 9.
For the next 9.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are we able to help with people with strategies around a situation like that? Is that something that, because I'm sure that situation happens to a number of people listening.
Yeah.
They can, whether it's that mid-round slump, all the things that we've heard and read about before, for no rhyme or reason. But, do you think that we'll be able to help the listeners, at some point develop an understanding of why that might happen and give them some strategies or techniques that they might be able to put in place to limit those factors? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, even when you brought that up and we just discussed it briefly, one of the things that I mentioned was, ego versus mastery, is that you reacted in that moment out of ego, out of not wanting to keep up, but if he can do it, I can do it. And you were, making that decision based on a player who was not at your level. He's a few levels above you, which is
definitely,
which men, we're great at that. We're great at thinking we can do something that is over and above our ability. But But I said to you also, I said it's about understanding your patterns, and it's like people that go for the hero shot when they know they shouldn't. It's about understanding your patterns and pre-planning or preparing yourself for that moment. So an hour or two before the round or the day before the round, start to prepare yourself mentally and think about, okay, these are my patterns that cost me shots. Tomorrow, my focus and my emphasis is making sure I stay true to my game plan, stay true to making smart decisions versus hero decisions. And ultimately, my goal for the round is to be completely in control of all of those decisions. I don't care what score I shoot. So bring the goal, the emphasis back to decision-making process. One thing the other thing we mentioned is I do a lot of 3-hole checkpoints. I get clients to, after 3 holes, just go through a bit of a checkpoint, just do a mental and a physical scan. So, just scan your thoughts. Am I still thinking clearly? Am I still sticking to my game plan? Do a mental scan, a physiology scan of, okay, how's my body feeling? Am I still relaxed? I'm calm. Am I confident? Just every 3 holes, and then go again for the next 3. I think a lot of club golfers use that little bit of a scan after 9 holes. And by that time, it's the damage is already done. That's 2.5 hours into a round of golf. So much can change from a mental and emotional point of view. Having those 3-hole checkpoints where you just check in with yourself after you write your score down on that 3rd hole, the 6th hole, the 9th hole. Just keep checking in with yourself so you never get too far off track. Because it's ultimately, let's say we talk about 0 to 5. It's ultimately stage 3 to 4, 4 to 5 that cause those really poor decisions and the blowout holes. But if you're at a 1 out of 5 or a 2 out of 5 from whether it be an emotional point of view, then you're going to be able to manage the damage that that can occur.
So I guess that scanning point, as you say, starts the day before. There should be multiple scans that you're doing. If you're serious about your golf, and I think we all are, and if we've got this far in the podcast, I think we're talking to serious golfers who want to get better. That scanning point can be, let's say when you wake up in the morning. Whether you've slept well. Whether you're hydrated, and all of those things that we know about. My round today then subsequently went, and I said it affected everything else, but there was one key point. Now, you know my game well enough, but I'll tell everyone else that, and the people who listen on the My Love of Golf podcast know that I'm constantly berating myself for my short game and making light of it at my own expense, which I'm totally fine with. I probably realise now, after spending some time with Jamie, that's probably not a good strategy. But what happened after putting myself under the pressure of, now I'm not only 1 over par, I'm 3 over par, and I'm coming up to a stretch of holes which are the tougher holes in the course. Sort of got somewhat back on track, but got to the 4th hole. And then the 4th hole was probably index 3 on the course, index 4. It's one of the tougher holes. It was downwind. I thought, well, my strength is my driver. I'm going to shoot this down the right-hand side with a bit of draw. Came back down. I was probably 15, 20 metres maximum off the front of the green. My next shot was played from 15 to 20 metres through the back of the green. So something happened. I'd been chipping and my short game had been okay. I probably never acknowledged that it's great, but it was okay. And okay for me is I'd made some good effective chips. I'd made some technique that I've been working on. I'd implemented that and it was working well. I hadn't flubbed anything. I hadn't skinned anything. The ball spun and stopped within a reasonable. But all of a sudden, I'm now feeling this anxiety and pressure, and it was like I just regressed. Anything that I'd done well had gone, and the feeling of that had gone away. And here I was knifing one through the back, and just feeling like I'd taken 10 steps back. And then another double bogey.
Because it's an interesting one because
that was after piping a drive 300 metres.
Because we look at. Obviously we look at the, your short game stuff and how you berate yourself, and we talk a lot about what your golf identity, like what identity or what story are you telling yourself about yourself? And if you continually talk about yourself in regards to I've got a shitty short game, then there's going to be moments in a round of golf where maybe that shot's quite a crucial shot, and then your identity comes to the surface. Prior to and earlier in the rounds where maybe the shots weren't as crucial, you weren't putting as much emphasis on outcome, you might have been able to stick more to your process of what is it that I'm technically need to do here, mechanically need to do here to give myself a chance of executing the shot. A lot of people think that thinking about mechanics is a negative from a mental game point of view, but that couldn't be further from the truth. Depending upon where you are, and I put it in my post up today about my round, competence before confidence. If you don't have competence, you cannot have confidence. A lot of the yips or those sort of deficiencies in games, a lot of them are driven by poor mechanics. Okay, so you got to have competence. Now, what you were doing early in the round was you were focusing on your mechanics, on your actions, the moves that you need to have to execute a good shot. Now, I'm sure within that moment of the second shot on the fourth hole where anxiety kicked in, maybe you became a little bit more attached to the outcome of the shot, the pressure of I've got to get this up and down and make a birdie and get a shot back, and you gave all power to the outcome, which is your external attention, and not enough on your internal attention. What do I need to do right now to give myself the best chance to hit a good shot? And we'll talk a lot about internal, external attention in upcoming podcasts. But with that 3-hole, I call it a thought journal. I get clients they have a notepad just every 3 holes. If you notice anything, a thought, write it down. Just write it down. Because one of the important things that I take all clients through, and new clients especially, is what I call a cognitive sequence. And that cognitive sequence consists of your thinking. It begins with your thinking. So there's 4 stages. There's thoughts, emotions, behaviors, outcomes. So your thoughts drive your emotions. The way you think and what thoughts you have puts you in a specific emotional state. Okay? That emotional state basically drives your behaviors, the way you perform, the way you swing a golf club. If you're confident, the way you swing a golf club is going to be different than if you were fearful, anxious. So then your behaviors, the way you swing a golf club, obviously have a massive impact on the quality of outcomes you have. So all goes back to the first thing, which is your thinking. Now, if I said to you, when was the last time you practiced your thinking? You're on the range or went out for 9 holes by yourself and you said, today I'm going to go out there and I'm going to practice the quality of my thinking. But when would you have ever done that?
Well, I don't even have to think about it because it's never.
Never. But it's the most powerful tool we have as golfers. A mate of mine who I play with at Peninsula, good friend of ours, I won't mention his name, Shura, but we were playing at Peninsula one day.
First drive-by for Shura Taft.
He's just standing there and he looked uncomfortable. And watch, he's got a little pitch shot into a par 5, into the 8th hole there, and he hit a shank. And he turned around and he said, I knew I was going to do that. I knew I was going to shank it. He goes, tell me what to do. And I said to him basically, you got to go and practice your thinking. And he blew it off and he goes, no, tell me what to do. I'm like, no, seriously. You knew by the thoughts you were having, you were going to shank it. You got to practice better thoughts. And it's one of the most important things. I'll do sessions. I'll have a notepad right next to my client's feet. Any thoughts you're aware of that are, maybe unproductive, just write them down. Write them down. Stop, write them down, then we'll go back to it. Some thoughts are fleeting. There's so many thoughts we have. We have in excess of 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day, right? So it's a huge amount of thoughts. We have a lot of thoughts. Most of them don't mean anything. They're just thoughts that just float by like clouds in the sky. And it's the same with our thinking around shots. Don't go left. It's just a thought. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean you're going to hit it left unless you let that thought sit and you react or respond to that thought. But if you just let that thought go, another thought's going to come. And all of a sudden that thought of don't going left's gone. It's going to be replaced with something else. Like, oh, maybe I'll hit it 10 feet right of the pin. So it's a matter of practicing your thinking, which is, I would challenge all of the listeners to next time they go and practice or go and play a few holes by yourself to actually practice your thinking and what type of thinking is beneficial for you.
A couple of interesting things in that little discussion thread there. And I'll go back to the first one. So you started talking about technical, and that practice and I don't know how you articulated it. Tell me if I'm wrong the right way, but feeling, practicing your technique, and getting that right.
Yeah.
So I immediately started to think about tall players.
Yep.
I'm always looking above, so I'm looking at the tall players, and I start to look at the players like a Justin Rose or a Eddie Pepperell, or a Alex Noren, that have these very defined and very, on the surface, to the unknowing, would look like a strange sort of practice routine.
Yeah.
So I guess, tell me if I'm wrong, is that what they're doing? They're getting that technical part and they're just ingraining that part without the need to go to any other place.
Yeah. Well, I had the luxury, I'm going to say, of walking 9 holes with Alex Noren at the PGA this year. So Herbie played 9 holes with him, and is a really interesting pre-shot routine and very overly exaggerated sort of technical feel. And I think the thing that I really noticed was he gets exaggerated so that in his shot he can let it go. He doesn't think about it. And I talk a lot about residual, making sure your routine is simple and purposeful so that you can actually use some of that as residual. That sensation or that practice swing or whatever it is you're doing, that sensation may last for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 seconds. So you can actually perform off the residual sensations of your routine. And that's what Noren does. He's so exaggerated, but that sensation in his body, that feel that he needs to make, because it's so exaggerated, may last for 12 seconds. So when he hits the shot, he doesn't need to think about it because his physiology is still feeling those sensations. But one thing that you mentioned there, which we all do and we shouldn't, is we look at these players and see what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's our worst nightmare.
Right.
Because club golfers, and that's why I talk a lot about competence versus confidence, these elite players, they're so competent where you and I will put me, because I'm just coming back in, just had a lesson a few weeks ago, I'm still trying to learn how to ride the bike of a golf swing, figure out what am I doing and what works for me. So I actually have to think a little bit more about my mechanics at this point in time. Today I hit the ball really nicely because I've been thinking about my mechanics the last 3 or 4 rounds. I've had a couple of practice sessions. What those practice sessions do for me is they create a really simple, less is more process, because I get rid of all the little things. I'm like, this is what works for me. So then I can keep it simple. But obviously I would like to get to a point where I don't have to have as much connection or attention on mechanics, but also ultimately it doesn't matter. If I hit the ball like the way I hit the ball today for the next 10 years and I have to think about mechanics, I'm happy. Right. Because one thing that we do as golfers is we push aside and try and avoid the importance of the outcome. Pre-shot routine, processes everything. Processes everything. It's a crock of shit. The outcomes are everything. We get judged on outcomes and outcomes only, not on how pretty our pre-shot routine was or how consistent we were. Mm-hmm. It's a safety blanket to make us feel better when we fail. It's okay to fail. This is the thing that I want to try and really bring is we need to invite and engage and confront stress, anxiety, pressure, fear, whatever it is. Don't avoid it. Don't try and block it out because you're not going to win. Bring it in and actually start to learn, why am I feeling this way in this situation? What does this mean to me that makes me feel this way? Instead of just going, oh, block it out. We can't do that anymore.
So I guess the other part that I was going to come to, and it's sort of aligned to what you were just talking about then, and I play with a lot of guys who are very, very stats driven, and I see a lot of people taking numbers on fairways hit, left or right, putts, and various other stats.
Yeah.
But you mentioned about that 3-hole thought, download.
Yep.
I don't see anyone writing down.
Yep.
Felt stressed.
Yep.
Felt great.
Yeah.
I'm a bit anxious about the chip shot that I had that I made last. No one's doing that, and I guess that's what you're saying there is inviting these thoughts in, and letting them become real, in a way that you can then let them go.
That's right. I mean, just learn from them. Like I'm feeling, and learn more about yourself and how you react and respond to the game of golf, because that whole saying golf is life, and the way you react to your golf game and the pressure is also possibly the way you react to stress and pressure in life itself.
Yeah,
like
right.
it is very closely related. But I think it's just an interesting point where stats are great, but what if you missed that fairway because of there was water left and you had a what we classify as an unproductive thought, or you tried to avoid thinking about the water, and then you hit it. You blocked the ball right. Some players are going to look at that as your swing broke down, but it was your mind that broke down. An interesting one on that avoidance pattern was working with an Aussie pro, Andrew Sconville, who I've worked with Sconners for a number of years, and a few months back, we were just talking about that avoidance pattern, or just inviting thoughts in. If you're having a negative thought or you're having any thought, just let them be there. Don't try and fight these thoughts anymore. Just let them be there. And anyway, a few weeks later, he's playing at Cape Schanck and having a pretty nice round. And he's got 3 holes to go. And he said to his playing partners, he goes, "Hey boys, if I birdie the last 3, I shoot 59." And the guys he was playing with were like, "Oh, you can't say that. Don't do that. You'll moz yourself. You obviously got to try and block it out and not think about it, like as most club golfers do." Like when you have a good round going, and Susie says to Judy, "Oh, you're playing well today," and Judy's like, "Oh, I've lost it. You've made me think about it now." Well, anyway, Sconners said, if I birdie the last 3, I'll shoot 59. So he's gone birdie, eagle, birdie, and shot 58 because he invited that situation in. He didn't let that situation overtake him and control him. He took control of the situation, confronted it, and then obviously that's a very empowering state. And then more importantly, he then committed to his plan. Okay, I'm now going to commit to hitting a good shot here. And he didn't have a pattern of fear or avoidance because he confronted it. And it's something that I really want to engage with the listeners in this podcast on, all the myths of the mental game. Don't think about the trouble and your pre-shot routine. You have to do the same thing every time. Like, to me, that's to do the same thing every time when you never ever have the same shot twice and your relationship to each shot is different. Why do the same thing every time? That doesn't make sense to me.
Not at all. When you put it that way, not at all.
So
I guess there's going to be a whole load of stuff that we can deliver. There's one last anecdote, I guess, that before we move into some questions that I want to throw up, and it's something that I have been working on, but it was reminded to me by my good friend Stuart Kerr. Now, if you know the name Stuart Kerr, he's part of Eric Anders Lang's team who are doing running around the world filming adventures in golf. Now, Stuart had a hole-in-one recently. I think it was his first.
I hate him.
Yeah, hate Stuart. Oh, yeah, yes. I know why. No,
guys, so that's why I hate him.
Jamie, if you follow Jamie enough on Instagram, you will know that he gets oft berated about not having had a hole-in-one. So
yeah,
I didn't go down this to point that out, Jamie. That's not what I was thinking at all.
I'm inviting it.
That's right, and this is where I'm going. So Stuart had a hole-in-one at Cape Kidnappers.
Nice.
Or Carry Cliffs, one of the two, Cape Kidnappers or Carry Cliffs. It was unbelievable. And it was on footage, and he stepped up to the tee, said, boys, I'm going to have a hole in one. Bang, they've got it on drone. Go and have a look at the video on Eric Anders Lane YouTube. It was fantastic. It was his first ever hole in one, and it's just amazing to see them capture it.
Yeah.
But in the outtake of that, and this is the point, Stuart was talking about some of his daily routines and that 5-minute journaling and that positive affirmations. And one of those positive affirmations that he mentioned in that video was to have a hole in one.
Yeah.
And and the timeline between doing that and the affirmations became true in a very, very rapid time. Yeah. Now, I equate that to my own game and some of the things that I try and do very early part in the journey in this mental mastery game for me, and thanks for your help. But one of my weaknesses that I discovered was in keeping some stats. I'm not a big stats keeper. I'm more of a feel person, but I was losing shots on par threes. I wasn't hitting par threes, so therefore putting myself under pressure with the short game, and it was just disaster recovery. Yeah. Since thinking about a hole in one, now a hole in one is not something I've had since the 14th September 1987, to give you an indication of how old I am. But since I started thinking about I am going to have a hole in one sooner rather than later, funnily enough,
your stats improved.
My par three game is now one of the best parts. My seven, I almost felt like, and I would joke about this in a negative way, once again, talking to myself in that probably what I'm going to learn is not the best way to talk to myself, that give me a 7-iron, 150 out, and I'll put it on the green on a par 4, par 5 or wherever. Yeah. Give me a 7-iron, 150 out with a tee block either side of me and watch me hit it left, right, thin, fat, whatever. Yeah. But since I started to think about narrowing my vision to I want to have a hole in one, I think it's improved my ability to.
Well, you've got intention now.
Right.
You've got an intention where possibly before you knew your stats on par threes weren't great, so maybe you were performing with a bit of an avoidance, meaning you're avoiding hitting a shit shot. You're not going to be able to commit to hitting a shot. But as soon as you say, I want to have a hole in one, you're now giving yourself some intention and something to commit to. Same thing happened to me a few years ago where all this hole in one stuff started. A couple of clients just thought they'd make a great joke of tagging me in every post of anyone on social media having a hole in one. And so then I'm like, that's it, screw you. I'm going to have a hole in one. And I hit some of the best iron shots on par threes I've hit in a long time because of that fact. I didn't care if I hit one out of bounds or in the water. I was just trying to hit that in the hole. And, the law of attraction, obviously, it attracted itself to Stu pretty well. It hasn't done so with me as yet, but it's, for me, it's, again, facing the fear. If I commit to hitting a good shot and I don't, I'm much more okay with that than if I'm standing up there scared, worried, concerned, fearful, and then I just come out of a shot. Like, performing in a state of fear is one of the most uncomfortable, unhappy states we can function in. So,
well, Jamie, if the outcome of this podcast series is the fact that you and I achieve a hole in one, I think we've hit the goal. But I'm absolutely the belief that it's not too far away from me. After years of playing golf, since coming back to the game after having a break, of not thinking that it's ever going to happen again and making a joke of it, I actually believe that I'm going to have a hole in one. So there you go. So, mate, we've got some questions here that the listeners or the followers of you on Instagram and some of mine were happy enough to shoot to us. So why don't we run through in some of those and
I'll run through those. Thank everyone for sending those through. That was great. I'll just go through one at a time. First one is Jack on Instagram. Best way to practice mental performance. Obviously, mental performance is I'd consider a fairly big, large sort of box of tools. So
tune into the Mental Mastery Golf Podcast every week. There's one way.
Exactly. That's a good thing. I think first is to clarify the specific areas where, you feel, Jack, that you need strength in, whether it's self-belief, focus, transferring your practice form to a competitive setting. So just to be able to really clarify what those areas are for you. I think a couple of, generic, processes that I think a lot of people can really benefit from is creating some stillness and calmness in a round of golf. So, practicing hitting balls in a state of calmness, getting out on the golf course, putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, but practicing being calm in that moment. Managing expectations is another one. I think a lot of people, especially club golfers, their expectations are probably a little out of whack because they've hit that 6-iron, high and drawing to that back left pin. They've hit it, twice in their life. They think it's all of a sudden become a 90% shot when it's a 0.9% shot. So, managing expectations is a big one. But I know Jack is a I think a scratch golfer. So, Jack, I think practicing with some consequence and some competitiveness, make practice harder, more stressful than tournaments. So, a lot of consequence practice, a lot of competitive practice. I think that is a great way for you to practice some of those mental game skills. So, next question was from Pete on Instagram. Focusing on target or focusing on routine? He said that was always an interesting conversation. Focusing on routine, as I said, it's I would hope to think in a productive routine that most routines do have some form of connection to the target, but there are people out there that have zero connection to the target. So again, it's just a little bit of horses for courses, what works best for you. I think that, that internal and external attention, which we'll go into in a later podcast, but internal attention is having your mind's attention on your body, on what you're doing, versus external attention, which is having your having your mind's attention on the target. So there's a mind's eye exercise that I'll be doing in the video program and also in an upcoming podcast that I'll talk about that really goes into more of that detail about how to strengthen your mind's ability to connect to the target. So, so that is that's a great one. So Pete, keep an eye out for that one. Also, Pete just spoke about expectations, the management of expectations. One thing I like to do is have building blocks. Instead of having one big goal, to break that goal into 3 or 4 smaller goals so that you can have those little building blocks along the way. So it's a sort of a multi-tiered expectation as opposed to just having one goal. Again, that goal of, shoot for the clouds, sky, or, and you'll fail, you hit the clouds, whatever that BS statement is, I'm not quite sure. But again, that's another one I'll bring up about goal setting and how unproductive I perceive that type of goal setting is. But next question comes from Aiden on Instagram. This is an interesting one, Roscoe. I want you to listen to this and tell me what you think. How do I stick to the game plan on course without losing focus and doing same old stupid stuff? Now, if I asked you which word stands out in that statement, I'll read it again. How do I stick to the game plan on course without losing focus and doing the same old stupid stuff? Stupid. So possibly, again, that comes into that identity, the story that we tell ourselves about ourselves. Let's say if Aiden has been creating this pattern of just, brain farts, for example, by the sounds of it. Aiden, maybe you are creating that story in your head that you do stupid stuff, and then inevitably what's going to happen is you're going to just keep repeating history. So I would say, first and foremost, I try and identify what type of golfer you want to be. So what's the opposite of a golfer that does stupid stuff? Think about what that is. What decisions, what actions, what behaviors, what thoughts would a player of that identity have during a round of golf? Once you clarify that, then make it your objective, make it your goal next time you go out there to focus on executing, committing those actions, those behaviors, those thoughts of that golfer that is opposite to the person that does stupid stuff. So I hope that makes sense. Again, identity and storytelling is going to be a great podcast, and also will be part of one of the video programs coming up soon. Next question is from Jack. Tip on getting into the zone or scoring mindset from the first tee, which, Jack, great question. Again, Jack's a scratch golfer, tournament golfer. Really, really good question. I'm going to break it down very simply. First, tip on getting into the zone. Well, the zone is a state of calmness and clarity. So when we talk about that from a mind point of view, we want to go through a decluttering process. So a 4 or 5 minute, say, meditation session, breathing session, a 4 or 5 minute session with your earphones in, just decluttering your mind just to keep it nice and clear. That is going to help you to access the zone. And then the next one, which is getting yourself into a scoring mindset from the first tee, that is a great one. And it comes back to your pre-round warm-up. For the most part, when I watch, even at the elite level, people warming up, we want to look at activating your nervous system. When you're in competitive mode, your nervous system is activated and engaged. You're competing, you're intense. We want to replicate or trigger that sort of state in your warm-up. So add in a little bit of consequence practice into your pre-round warm-up. So if there's a pin that you're aiming at, perceive that pin's on the left side of the green. Give yourself a 20 foot, 25 foot sort of target area right of the pin. If let's say you've got a 7-iron, and give yourself, okay, I've got to hit 3 out of 4 of these within that 20-foot dispersion right of the pin with none going left. So add a bit of that consequence, and also add a bit of that competitive mindset where you've got to hit 3 out of 4. That's I know Francesco Molinari's done a huge amount of competitiveness, single ball competitiveness in his warm up to replicate what he's going to deal with when he goes out on the golf course. And all really that's doing is activating your nervous system and switching your mindset over into the mindset that you're going to need to compete in. So great question there, Jack. Next one's from Blake. How do I control anger? It's a very broad question and a very tough one to answer, but for the most part, 2 things, it's expectation and acceptance. So what I'll say is, again, expectation. A lot of golfers go out there and expect today to be the day. Today is going to be that day, and their expectations are quite high, and it's a perfectionism type of an expectation. And then when reality hits, they're not prepared for it. So I would just say to prepare yourself for reality, which means prepare yourself for unlucky breaks, bad bounces, missed short putts, bad shots. Just prepare yourself that is going to happen in the upcoming round, so that when it does happen, you're already pre-prepared for it. It's not so much of a shock to the system, and that anger won't get triggered or get escalated. So, and the acceptance part of it, just accept that golf is really tough and that you're not perfect, that you're human, that you make mistakes. So if you can just really focus on just adding a little bit of that expectation management and that acceptance, I think that's going to go a long way to some good emotional control there, Blake. Next question is from B. Watson Golf on Instagram. How to accept the bad and a process to keep emotions on an even keel. A little bit about what we spoke about before, just about preconditioning yourself for reality before the round of golf. Prepare yourself for what would be reality, and all of our realities are different. So it's important that you prepare yourself for your reality at your level, at the course you play. What are the things that happen that do derail you? And again, that pre-planning or preconditioning yourself will actually help you to keep your emotions even. That's That's an important one. We'll also talk a lot about the post-shot routine in the next podcast, and that's a really big one for helping to keep emotions nice and even. So make sure you listen out for that one.
Good question, Billy. And I see Billy Watson.
Billy Watson, yep.
Is a second-year PGA of Australia trainee up at the Longreef Golf Club.
Great.
You ever played at Longreef?
I haven't. I heard it's gorgeous.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I heard it's gorgeous, and I'm heading up to Sydney later in the month, but I probably won't get a chance to play it. But I hear it's gorgeous.
Go and see Billy at Longreef Golf Club. What a place!
Yeah, no, Billy, that's sensational. And as I said, we'll get into that post shot routine stuff in the next podcast. So, next question is best advice for concentrating on positive and keep negative thoughts away, from Renata on Instagram. Well, as I just said, similar sort of a question. Post shot is going to be an important one, but acceptance that negative thoughts are normal. A lot of people have this fear of a negative thought and what it means and what it's going to do to our performance. But just because we have a negative thought, it doesn't mean we're going to hit a poor shot. You know, as I said to someone the other day, you know, just because there's a cloud in the sky doesn't mean it's going to rain. So just be aware that negative thoughts are very normal and that they don't mean anything. So that's and this is an interesting example. Ryan Ruffles was telling me the other month he played with Jason Duffner and Pat Perez in a PGA Tour event. I think it was last year. And first hole, Duff hits one off the tee. I think it was in the Zurich Classic when he played with Jason Day. I think, you know, Duff hits one off the tee and hits an okay shot, but he's berating himself. He's telling him, you know, what an idiot he is and he's such a loser. And then Pat Perez hits one and he's like just into himself. So they're being so negative, but that works fine for them. Just because they're being negative, it doesn't mean it has a negative impact on performance. But that's what drives them. That's just, you know, a little bit of self-deprecating humor, which humor is always a great source of emotion or a great strategy to you know, keep your emotions sort of under check a little bit. But it's an interesting thing that, you know, we perceive a negative thought to be negative when it's just a thought.
Just another thought.
Just another thought in the other 60 or 80,000 that we have each day.
Mate, have you still got some questions there? Because we're getting short on time and we've covered a lot. We probably might leave some of those questions to next week. If there are, well, not if there are, there will be some more questions. Please just fire them through to us. Keep it coming because, you know, your questions will drive the direction, drive some of the content. It'll tell us what you want to learn from this and it'll allow Jamie to craft, you know, a great podcast every week. So the questions are super, super valuable and we really do appreciate the feedback that we've got so far, just based on, you know, a couple of posts on Instagram saying we're putting this together. Yeah. And once again, you know, I'll say it again that the feedback that I got was first class, and I really do think that, you know, what you're onto here with doing this and putting it out together, we're on a winner. I think as a first episode, Jamie, I think we've, you know,
it's great. It's gone a bit longer than I probably intended, but
look, people. What I've learned from the My Love of Golf podcast is that, you know, people consume the podcast in a different way. If they have a time for an hour, they'll take an hour. Yeah. If they do it in 2.5 hours, they'll do it in 2.5 hours. No, that's great. So, you know, is there anything else from you in closing, mate? Is there any other? No, look, I just appreciate everyone, you know, the response and the questions that came through. And as Roscoe said, we'll get to those last sort of 3 or 4 questions in that next podcast. I think episode 2, I want to really delve into routines and what that means, pre-shot, post-shot, pre-game, post-game, subconscious mind stuff, and that'll be really sort of impactful. But no, look, just appreciate everyone's support so far, and hit us up with any more questions or comments. So if you want to learn about routines and you have a routine and you want to explore how that routine is working for you, you might shoot us a note to say what it is. And we might be able to help you expand on that, improve it. We might be perfect. But, you know, next episode, we'll be talking about that, maybe some other stuff. So, on behalf of myself, Ross Flannigan, host of My Love of Golf podcast and co-host of the Mental Mastery Golf podcast. I'd like to thank you all for joining in. And Jamie, it's been great, mate.
Yeah, thanks, Roscoe. I really appreciate your help, mate.
Well, that's it. Episode 1 of the Mental Mastery Golf podcast. You can check it out on Podbean. It'll be on iTunes. It'll be on Spotify. It'll be on everywhere where you get your podcasts. The important thing about a podcast and the success of it is that you tell a friend, share it. And if you like it, that is, of course, please share it, because this is the way that will expand the message, expand the reach, and help more and more golfers just like you, just like me, and just like Jamie. Thanks again. And until next time, the Mental Mastery Golf podcast is now live. Appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Mental Mastery Golf podcast by Dare2Dream. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast and head over to dare2dream.com.au for exclusive access to the free video program, 8 Tips to an Unbreakable Mental Game. Join us next time on the Mental Mastery Golf podcast.